celebrity wing, again, air quotes with wing. And I guess people would place you in that status of, maybe not the superstars, but people who had a major part in, decision makings, like commissioners or presidents, or somebody like if they ever inducted someone like Vicky Guerrero down the road, who had an intricate part of the business in one way or another, that you'd be kind of lumped in with the non-superstar wrestler part of it. But I mean, me personally, not to sound like a fan, but I just think that you did so much for the business that not to have it put out there for everybody to see. And now with the network, they'll hear your name and they can go back and see all the days of WCW and all those things that you did to help this business. And I just think, somebody needs to recognize you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. You just did, so there you go. Everybody that's listening to the show just did, so I appreciate it.
From my mouth to Triple H and Vince's ears, there you go. Now, how is your? It is a guy I want to. Did you had any kind of relationship with Triple H? Because he was kind of like the general of WWE during those days of the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars. Now, when you went to WWE, how was it with like him?
I get along with him. I mean, we weren't friends. I mean, friendly. We were friendly and professional. I enjoyed working with him, and I think he probably enjoyed working with me because we were both pretty good at what we did. So when we did work together, it was always, I think we both walked away feeling like we did great work together. But it's not like we went out to dinner after the show or anything. I never got invited over to the house for cocktails or anything like that. So, but it was very professional.
Okay.
And look, Triple H worked at WCW while when I was just an announcer there.
Right.
And he was a good friend of Diamond Dallas Page's. I remember being at a Christmas party at DDP's house, and Triple H was there, and we got along about the same way. Now that was obviously before I was in charge and things like that, but always cordial, friendly, but I wouldn't say friends. If that makes sense.
Okay, no, yeah. Is there any talent that you regret that you had at WCW that you had while you were in charge that kind of maybe passed through your fingers and wound up in WWE and had a major career?
No, not at all. And part of that is, look, nobody's got. People like to think they have 20, or people like to think that they could go back and they would have made, decisions or choices differently if they were given that opportunity. But the fact is, look, it's been talked about to death, and Stone Cold Steve Austin had me on his podcast, and I think we talked for 4 hours about it.
Right.
But the fact that I cut him loose, when I cut him loose, the way I cut him loose, I think if you go back and find that podcast, I don't want to put words in Steve's mouth, but to paraphrase him, he would have done the same thing if he would have been in my shoes.
Right.
That's the honest answer. Now, 20/20 hindsight, or if I had a crystal ball, or I could read into the future, first of all, I'd be playing poker or gambling in Las Vegas, or being the king of the stock market. I wouldn't have been in the wrestling business. But if I did have that, clairvoyant talent to be able to see into the future, of course I would have never let Stone Cold go, Steve Austin go. And by the way, I would have started calling him Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Right.
And so, but you can't. I don't look at things that way. I just don't spend a lot of time thinking like that.
Okay. I mean, you had some guys like Jericho was there, and obviously he's had some impact in wrestling.
Well, no, listen, I tried to keep Jericho. I didn't let him slip through my fingers, for crying out loud. I fought to keep him. But, Chris and I have talked about that. We're pretty good friends now. And Chris came to WCW knowing it was a stepping stone for him to get to WWE.
Okay.
He didn't come there to build a career in WCW and be the longest reigning world heavyweight champion and retire there. He came there specifically because he knew it would be a great stepping stone to get where he wanted to be, which is WWE. And I fought hard to keep Chris offered him quite a bit of money to keep it. But Chris was determined to fulfill his dream, and he did.
Okay, so now what about current day? A man that I guess you in the storylines you claimed to create, Goldberg, and now he's back on TV. So how does it feel to see him back?
I'm happy for him. You know, it's amazing that it's 20 some odd years now, 2 decades after we introduced Bill Goldberg, and he became a massive star in sports entertainment. 2 decades later, he's headlining WrestleMania. Are you kidding? How do you think it makes me feel? It makes me feel great. But really, what it does is it makes me feel happy for Bill, because now he's, you know, number one. And I said this to Bill a couple of weeks ago. You know, we're chatting about something completely different, but I told him that I'm happy for him because he gets to end his career on a very positive note. Because his first run in WWE, he wasn't happy with it. He was miserable. He didn't like the way it turned out. He didn't feel good about it. He didn't even want to talk about it. He had nothing but bad things to say about the experience. And you hate to go through your life with that kind of a blemish on your own track record. And I think the fact that Bill, you know, got a chance to go back to WWE and kind of resolve some of those issues, and now he gets to, whenever he's going to leave, I don't know when he's going to leave, he could be there for another year or two for all I know.
Yeah.
But whenever it is, I guarantee you he's going to go out on a much, much more positive note. And the other thing I'm happy for him about is that his son, Gage, gets to watch him.
Right.
And see his dad, you know, being that larger-than-life character, because his son hasn't even born the first time around. So I think it's, for those 2 reasons alone, I think it's a phenomenal thing.
No, I mean, you know, the story itself of his comeback is very, you know, it's very heartfelt, because he's so about family and his kid, and you know, being the superhero to the young kids, and which is great. And then you got, you know, his storyline within the wrestling business and things, you know, that's going great. And, you know, he's back in the Lesnar, the storyline, things like that. I mean, because we all saw what happened that year, that the two of them fought, and they both knew they were leaving, and the fans just destroyed them in that match. And it was a very ugly match, and I'm sure they'll both say that. But I'm happy to see that, you know, he's, you know, back in the game. And he's able to do, you know, like you said, perform in front of his son, and he's old enough to understand now what's going on, and it's and he's still in phenomenal shape. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, he is.
Monster, absolute monster. So, what is your opinion on the current state of wrestling now?
Oh, well, as I said before, I'm excited that the business model of wrestling is as powerful as it is. You know, you've got 2 shows on cable television, you know, Raw and SmackDown, that are both probably in the top 10 of all the cable television shows, you know, each and every week. I think that's phenomenal. That's a great thing. I love the success that we're seeing, you know, on the independent scene even. You look at the success of WWE, and, you know, it's interesting to talk about it. There's no real competition anymore, and I agree with you. You know, TNA is clearly not competition.
Right.
WWE owns about 97 or 98% of the television marketplace, and everybody else shares 2%. So there is no competition. However, if you look at the growth on the indie scene, you look at the growth of the indie scene overseas, a lot of that can be attributed to the WWE.
Right.
So I think that while there is no, you know, head-to-head competition, I think it's also safe to say that, you know, wrestling is healthier now in some respects than it's ever been. There are more independent wrestling promoters now, I'm guessing. I don't know this as a fact, but I'm guessing there are more independent wrestling promoters now than there's ever been in history. I'm guessing there are probably more independent wrestlers who are at least able to make somewhat of a payday, and in some cases very good paydays on the indie scene, both here in the United States and overseas. There's probably more of them now than there's ever been in history. So there's a lot of positive things that you can say about the state of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Just because we don't see the head-to-head kind of competition the way we used to, doesn't mean that the business as a whole isn't better off.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a two-part question. This is a personal question of mine. I was a big Randy Savage fan growing up, and I just wanted to, like, how was your experience working with him?
I loved working with Randy. Randy was intense. There's no question about it. There were times, and there were very few of them, to be really, really fair. I mean, less than a handful of times that I can recall. There were times when dealing with Randy was you had to be a patient person. You had to be able to really manage yourself, because it was easy to kind of get frustrated and lose your temper sometimes with a guy like Randy, because Randy was so intense. Not because he was a bad guy or because he was right or because he was wrong, but when his mind was set on something, or he was convinced that he was right about something, he could be a little difficult to move. Mm-hmm. So there were some of those times, but like I said, there was a small handful of that, and the rest of the time I found, first of all, Randy was honest. He would shoot straighter than straight. Mm-hmm. Whether you liked what he had to say or you didn't like what he had to say, he didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't soft sell it. He didn't try to work a big circle around behind you to get where he wanted to get. He just flat out looked in the eye and told you what he thought. And I've always liked people like that. Right. I especially liked working with wrestlers like that, because that wasn't always the case. So I had a blast working with Randy. We got along socially as well. When we weren't around the wrestling environment, I would go down to Florida and we would hang out, sometimes, and went to the Bahamas together once, and we spent some time together away from the wrestling environment. And I always got a kick out of Randy.
Okay. Now I know DDP said that he owed Randy Savage a lot for kind of revitalizing his career and giving him the boost into the limelight. I mean, is that true?
Well, if Paige feels that way, then it's certainly true. I mean, Paige tells me how he feels. So I think it would be weird for anybody to suggest that Paige doesn't get to feel the way he feels. But I can understand why he feels that way, too. I wouldn't say agree, because I support it. Randy was one of Paige's first big kind of main event breakthroughs. And Randy worked super hard, as did Paige, to make sure that match and that moment was as good as it could possibly be. And they both worked really hard, and they were both really committed. So I certainly understand why Paige feels the way he feels.
Okay. Last part of that, this questions. Why, in your opinion, why do you think it took so long for him to get inducted into the Hall of Fame?
I don't know. I don't know the process. There's a lot of deserving individuals out there. It's not like they induct 25 people a year. It's a small, select group of people, and look at it this way: they've got a lot of halls of fame that they're going to have to continue to produce. You can't just induct every, from the 80s and 90s and one fell swoop, and then you start digging up names that people don't really remember. So, look, Paige was a very important part of a very important era. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it took too long. He's only 61 years old. It's not like he's 90.
Right. Yeah. Well, kind of wish he was still around, because he definitely seems like he could be somebody that would be really cool to bring to conventions and do meet and greets with fans. He just always seemed like that kind of personable guy.
Oh, he's a personable guy. He loves being around the fans, and he's still available. I'm sure if anybody really wanted to book him for a convention, he'd be happy to jump at the opportunity.
Oh, I seen DDP at a couple. He always had a big herd of people around his table, but A little bit, maybe a little bit out of my price range.